The Mandela Effect is one of the most controversial topics surrounding quantum physics. For years, scientists have been trying to come up with a viable explanation for how millions of people can all share the same false memory. But what if they aren't? What if the Mandela Effect is actually proof that our world is made up of multiple parallel universes that are constantly overlapping? For starters, the Mandela Effect has never been properly defined. In fact, experts disagree on what the term even refers to. To some, it simply means a false memory, like when someone vividly remembers a certain event happening one way, but evidence suggests it happened differently. However, for others, it means something much stranger, namely the idea that our universe occasionally overlaps with other parallel universes. It's this latter definition that has captured the public's imagination, giving rise to a whole industry of YouTube videos devoted to uncovering the hidden secrets of the Mandela Effect. But before we get into those alleged secrets, let's first explore the possible scientific explanations for why the Mandela Effect happens. The strange thing about these false memories is that they are always of things that are supposed to be universal. It is not like people misremembering the color of a friend's eyes or the shape of their face. Instead, it's massive discrepancies in history, famous brand logos, and other aspects of human culture that millions of people swear have changed. Take, for instance, the time that Nelson Mandela died. As you probably already know, he passed away in 2030 after serving as the president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. But according to some people, he didn't die in 2013. He died in prison back in the 1980s. So many people believed this to be true, in fact, that it became known as the Mandela Effect. However, there's no doubt that Nelson Mandela died in 2013. It's a verifiable historical fact. But what about all those people who are claiming otherwise? One possible explanation is that they're remembering events from an alternate timeline. In this scenario, there are an infinite number of parallel universes, each one existing in its own four-dimensional space. Usually, these universes don't interact with each other, but every now and then, they do. It's like when two people walk through the same doorway at the exact same time or bump into each other on a crowded street. At those times, there's a brief overlap between the two universes and information can pass through. According to this theory, that's why we sometimes have false memories of historical events. Let's say, for example, that in one universe, Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s, but in our universe, he lived until 2013. If those two universes were to momentarily overlap, someone in our universe could briefly experience the death of Nelson Mandela in the 1980s. Even though they would physically still be alive in 2013, of course, this would uncreate a paradox since the overlapping universes would quickly split back into their own separate timelines. This idea is known as quantum immortality, and it's based on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. According to this interpretation, every time a decision is made or a quantum event occurs, the universe splits and creates a new parallel reality. But let's be honest, the idea that alternate universes are overlapping doesn't really explain anything. It's just moving the question of why we have false memories to the question of why the universes are overlapping in the first place. Well, one way to make sense of the overlapping universes is to imagine them as existing on a higher level of reality. This is similar to the simulated reality theory, which posits that our three-dimensional world is actually just a computer simulation. If our world is simulated, it's possible that the code could occasionally glitch, leading to strange anomalies in space and time. And the glitches could allow us to briefly glimpse alternate universes that exist outside of the simulation. That would explain why the Mandela Effect seems to happen randomly. There's no way to predict when the universes will overlap, but there are ways to increase the likelihood. One of the most common ways to overlap universes, according to the simulation hypothesis, is by thinking about alternate realities. People who spend a lot of time thinking about the multiverse are more likely to experience glitches in the simulation. So it stands to reason that people who are fascinated by the Mandela Effect are also more likely to experience it. Unfortunately, there's no way to tell whether or not our world is simulated, let alone whether it glitches from time to time. So the simulation hypothesis isn't exactly a satisfying explanation either. Another possibility is that the Mandela Effect is being caused by some kind of advanced technology. Like if there is some sort of machine that allows us to glimpse into other universes, or a government conspiracy that's manipulating our memories. Now, both of these ideas are popular among theorists, but neither of them are particularly well supported by evidence. Ultimately, we may never know why we have false memories of universal events, but that hasn't stopped people from coming up with all sorts of creative explanations. After all, the Mandela Effect is one of the most intriguing mysteries of our time. It challenges everything we know about reality and raises profound questions about the nature of existence itself. Who knows? Maybe someday soon we'll uncover the truth. But until then, we're left to wonder if the Mandela Effect is just a glitch in the Matrix. And speaking of glitches in the Matrix, there are plenty of places online where people claim to have found definitive proof that we're reliving in a simulation. Here are a few of the top contenders. First up is the simulation argument. This is the idea that if we're living in a computer simulation, there should be a relatively even split between those who are running the simulation and those who are living inside it, since it's far more likely that we're being simulated than we are doing the simulation. That means there's probably an equal number of sims to simulators. If that's true, it's only a matter of time until we figure out we're reliving in a simulation and meet the people who created it. Of course, there's no real evidence to support the simulation argument, but it makes for a very interesting thought experiment. Next up is the simulation anomaly. This refers to the curious fact that we seem to be living in a time where simulations are becoming increasingly realistic. As computers get more powerful, it'll become easier and easier to simulate reality, and eventually we'll reach a point where simulations and reality are indistinguishable from one another. If that's the case, it's possible that we've already reached the tipping point. We might be living in a simulation right now that's indistinguishable from reality. Then there's the simulation prediction. This is the idea that if we're living in a simulation, there should be signs of it at the most fundamental level of reality. Basically, if we look closely enough, we should be able to see the pixels in the simulation. Unfortunately, we haven't found any evidence of pixelation yet. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're not living in a simulation. It could just mean that the simulation is higher resolution than we are capable of perceiving. There are plenty of other arguments and anomalies that could prove we're living in a simulation. But ultimately, none of them are conclusive. Until we find irrefutable evidence, the question of whether or not we relive in a simulation will continue to be debated by philosophers and scientists alike. So, do you think we're living in a simulation? Let us know in the comments below. And as we continue to explore the Mandela Effect, be sure to stay tuned for more updates. Thanks for watching.